The second point is to look at the state of Nigeria itself. Do we resemble a democracy? Do we work like a democracy? Do we talk like a democracy? Because the very fact that up till now, months after our elections and after swearing in a president, we still don't know who is going to be the president of Nigeria until the Supreme Court is over. Very much akin to the introduction of the video assistant referee in football, in which case we are like a man who has scored a goal, but we have to wait for the referee to go to VAR and confirm whether it was a goal or not a goal. It's not evident. It is a symptom of how modest our claims should be, because we very often confuse the very fact that we are in a civilian administration with the notions of being in a democracy. That if we cannot fix our electoral process, which is the defining law for how to choose leaders in a democracy, then we must be modest in our saying that we're in a democracy. Secondly, our judiciary is in a crisis of perception, but also based on the experiences that Nigerians have had. It will not be surprising if ordinary Nigerians think that the only thing the Supreme Court does is to look at election petitions. Because we're looking up to the Supreme Court to help extend the frontiers of democracy and human freedoms. But very often, those institutions with Nigerians perceive that they've now become so severely, compromised. That has consequences for democracy and how we see the process of democratization. We also have a raft of agitations across the country. We have seen the worst face of corruption in Nigeria. Femi Falana, my friend here, will speak about that because he's published a series of articles, talking about what happened under the Buhari administration. They were not the ones who caused corruption, but I think in the last administration we saw the ugliest face of corruption in many, whether in moral terms, financial terms, or other terms. And I'll mention that before I close. We have a country that we are now sharing with bandits. Our very sovereignty, which is guaranteed in the Constitution, is under assault because we have non-state actors, whether you call them bandits or Boko Haram. It is that the entire territorial integrity of the nation is at stake. Because nobody is excited now about being a Nigerian. Whether you are president, whether you are senator, no matter who you are, everybody is working with his, with bated breath, because we don't know. We are literally now being held hostages, by people that are a threat to the very existence of our democracy and our country. Hundreds and thousands of Nigerians are still unaccounted for. They are in the hands of bandits. They are in the bushes. The Chibok girls, all kinds of things. And if the essence of our Constitution is to guarantee a quantum of rights and freedom and the pursuit of happiness, what do we have to say? So when we talk about constitutionalism, we're also talking about a framework for guaranteeing, as I said, the freedoms that document contains. Now, the challenge therefore going forward is, what can we do? Now, there's a lot of distrust of the judiciary in Nigeria, but I consider the judiciary victims almost in the same way that every institution in Nigeria is suffering a crisis, whether it's the judiciary, whether it's the church, whether it's civil society, whether it's the academia, right across the country. So the question therefore is, I don't think we should assume that we're in a democracy. We should assume that we're marching towards a democracy, but the hard work is still undone. And that means rebuilding Nigeria after the kind of mess that the last administration has left our country, whether it is in civil society, whether it is in the most immoral distribution of resources and opportunities in Nigeria. We know the documents are there, the evidence is there. I've got stuff on my phone that gives a count of the number of federal institutions that were planted in Daura in the last 8 years, where the president comes from. I come from Southern Kaduna. Had I made this presentation as a keynote address with enough time, I would have shown you bullets. I would have shown you empirical evidence you can measure. That is that where I come from, there is not up till today, since the creation of Kaduna State, one single sign of a federal structure in the area of Nigeria where I come from. When you hear Nigerians talk about the South, when they talk about Southern Borno, Southern Adamawa, when they talk about Southern Bauchi, when they talk about Southern Nasarawa, when they talk about Southern Taraba, when they talk about Southern Kaduna, those areas are contiguous with the areas of poverty, neglect at the federal level. So the point therefore is that we need to think a little bit more clearly and much more creatively about how we can mobilize our people and how ordinary Nigerians can see that being in power is not just about opportunity for self-enrichment. Because the sad story, let me put it that way, the very fact that Daura has had the opportunities that it has never had since its existence. And that even Katsina, that is next door, has not seen the development that has taken place in Daura. Nothing personal, but just to say that we cannot run a skewed country, a country with such skewed opportunities and privileges, and pretend that we're in a democracy. So we look, when you look at, for example, what I call the violation and desecration